Interview number 1 with Clara Guice. Mrs. Guice, where were you born?
I was born here in Katy.
Which hospital? Oh.
Oh, at home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we didn't go to hospitals then.
What do you remember most about your mother's family?
About my own family, you mean?
On your mother's side.
Oh, on my mother's side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, she had a sister that lived in Houston in a family that her and her husband and the children used to come out real regularly when I was growing up. It was, a lot of people around every weekend rather, like on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun growing up.
Where
We used to play games, baseball and stuff like that.
Where were your father's side of the family from?
From Indiana, Greensburg, Indiana. So none of his family, lived here. They would come during the summers.
For visits.
Mm-hmm.
How did your parents meet? Do you remember?
Well, my mother's originally from New Orleans, and she was orphaned at 10 years old. So she would come and live with his sister and friends and so forth, and kind of go back and forth to New Orleans. She had a brother lived there, and another sister that had lived there. And I think probably, she started working at the telephone company as an operator when she was 14. She was a long distance operator. That they only had like one line at that time, like the Dallas, and she was the Dallas operator. And they could only talk to one person, see, at one time, and so she was always telling us about the secretaries. They didn't want to put on their boss before the other boss would answer. This kind of stuff. And anyway, my dad was in the grocery business with a brother in Houston. He originally was a conductor on a train in California. Then he came to Houston and joined his brother. And I think a friend knew them both, separately, and wanted them to meet, so she had a supper or something for them.
Sounds good. So your father was a grocer, right? After he moved here? He changed that. What is the first holiday or big family event that you remember that sticks out in your mind the most? Like any Christmas where you had a lot of relatives come down?
We had relatives all the time. That's what that, and big family gatherings and everything. Real often. I can remember one. I can't really remember the purpose. Being a child, it was, that we did have a lot of the other relatives that came. I had other relatives in Houston too. A lot of cousins and so forth with my mother's. So we were always having people. See, I grew up we had a dairy farm, and so we didn't get to go a lot. So everybody came to our place because it's a very tied down type of work,
I remember my aunt and uncle in Illinois. They had a farm. It wasn't strictly a dairy farm. They just had a whole bunch of different stuff there, and that was the neatest thing, just to go out there and visit. Because it's so laid back. Now the way we live, it's like always being run by the clock. You're worried about, you got to get here, you got to get there. But there it was just, you didn't worry about time. You just did things as they come.
That was nice. I think the same thing when I see my kids. Of the different lifestyles.
Rush.
Of course, we didn't, do a lot of the things in going. Maybe they're advanced mentally more than we were in worldly things, because, gosh, the things they've done and seen, I didn't do till I was,
What do you remember about the house that you lived in as a child? I guess on the farm.
Well, it was a wooden house, and we still have it. When the freeway came through, I lived between Katy Fort Bend and Peak Road. There was, I don't know whether you've noticed, a house set back on the right hand side of it.
Yeah. I've seen the house.
That's the property that I grew up on. And of course, the house we lived in was right in the middle of the freeway.
Oops.
So when the freeway came through, see, we had property on both sides of the road, and we used to put the cattle across the highway. That was fun. Yeah, when the traffic started getting, you know, heavy, like on holidays, it would just be bumper to bumper, and, you know, people coming back to Houston.
But the cows had fun with
Yeah,
that.
so we'd just have to stop the traffic, you know, and get them across. But they were trained real well, you know. I mean, they all stayed together and everything, and knew where they were going. They knew they were going to get fed, so
They hurried.
it wasn't real hard to get them across. But this house then was moved to Schulenburg, and my farm, the dairy, was moved up there also in the '60s.
So at least the
So
freeway
my brother's still living in it.
Really?
It was a nice big house. I mean,
Those way farmhouses are.
our
They got so much
house,
space.
you know, I always like to tell the kids that we had the first bathtub in Katy and running water in the house. I didn't remember that, but I've always been told that. You know, I'm the youngest of 7 children, so they experienced all these other things that you know, it was quite modern when I came along.
Yeah.
But my family always told me about all these things.
Did you ever move during your childhood? Do you remember?
No.
You used to live in a farmhouse. What do you view as the biggest change since you were a child? I guess, like in the lifestyles, the biggest difference between the way children live today and how you live.
And how you live? Well, being that I lived here, it was a very small town, you know. So it may not compare with like people that grew up in the city at the same time, but it was so much different. When, you know, we had like maybe 200 people in the town when I was very small. Of course, you know, 700 or 800 by the time I was in high school. And I think probably 1,500 by the time I graduated. We had less than 1,000 kids in the whole school when I graduated. And you knew everyone and everyone's family, and of course you were involved in everything they did. And, you know, I mean,
Kind
it was
of tight-knit. Now it's not really that much.
No, it's really nice that way. It's a shame that we can't live that way.
Because now you have the separate factions and stuff.
Well, you don't even know your neighbors. I mean,
That's the truth.
But I mean, the things that were done in the town, you know, everybody got together and did them together.
It seems like that's the way small towns are a lot of times. Because I can remember when I was growing up in Illinois, it was like that. You know, we knew everyone around. You know, you have your little potluck dinners and whatever. But I don't know. It just seems like it's grown out of that. Even if they're in Illinois now, it's the same way. It just kind of grows apart.
Actually, we didn't feel deprived at all. You know, as far as we lived close enough to a large town that we could go, you know, to Houston. Everybody drove to Houston, and we never thought anything about driving to Houston. You know, to do things and go places.
Makes a good.
But we like to come home. Right, we like to come home to our close place.
What school did you attend?
Katy Elementary.
What was the school like then?
Well, when I first started school, we had 2 classes in one room. I remember that, like first and second. We didn't have kindergarten, so we had first and second, and third and fourth. Like
Grouped
that.
together. Where was the school located?
In the same place Katy Elementary School is, but it's not that particular building. They tore down the building that was there. And the high school was right next to it. It was a 2-story brick building. And when I, let's see, I went through 7th and 8th there, I guess. And then they built the new school over here. So my high school was over in this same high school here.
Did that bring any more people in to the new high school? I mean, did it pull in any other people from other areas? I mean, did you pick up more people?
Not, well, I guess we did pick up the Brookshire kids, and there weren't that many. And the Addicts kids they always came here anyway, because there wasn't an elementary school even there. So that's why the territories reached so far, you know, because there's a long ways between Katy and Houston. There wasn't anything between there, so that's why your district goes all the way to was it Dairy Ashford somewhere in there?
Let's see. And so you didn't go to kindergarten because they didn't have it.
No.
About how many students did you have about when you started? Do you remember?
We probably had 20 something.
Classes.
in a class.
And so you had
There were
one room for the two
for
different
two
classes.
classes. I think by the time I was in 5th grade, we had separate. In the 6th grade, we had something like 40 kids. You know, that was a lot.
Big jump.
Yeah. And then it seemed like from then on they got smaller again. I don't know why. That age group, I think it did that several years. And then when we graduated, we had 26.
What were your favorite subjects in school?
In school, I guess English.
Writing into it?
Well, somewhat, yeah. I enjoyed English in high school.
Did you
We were in
continue
the
writing
band.
at all in the band?
Yeah, after I graduated, I just went to a business school in Houston for 1 year. The Southwestern Business. It had a full year's thing. And then I came back out here and I went to work for my sister. She owned the Times. And so I worked for her for about 18 years, I guess.
Newspaper is just fascinating.
It was very, very interesting. It was awfully hard work. We had the newspaper and the printing, which we did. Everybody did
Keep you busy.
everything, and it was mostly run by women. We had some like high school kids come in occasionally and help us. Some young men, but most of it was all women.
What instrument did you play in the band?
Trombone. And of course, I always liked to brag to John Jr. that we had sweepstakes every year. I was in. Of course, we were just 1A school at that time. But that didn't matter. Anyway, we had a lot of fun in band. We used to go to all the surrounding towns had like FFA fairs mostly. We had the FFA, but they had fairs there and parades. And so the band went to everybody's band went to their parades every year. And we also marched in the Houston parade all the time. And my senior year, I guess we went to the state fair. And we were in the Cotton Bowl for a game there. And participated. There were a number of bands that, we all worked together in foreign matters and stuff. But, so we weren't so, backwoods back then.
No.
We did a lot of
Had the
lot of
musical
things.
talent.
Well, I mean, it was just things they did then.
What do you remember as being fun times from your childhood? Or what activities did you have?
Well, a lot of it, I guess, was at home. We did a lot of things. Well, our biggest time, I guess, is my cousin would come in the summertime and spend 2 weeks with us. And she was a city girl, and so, but she was mean as everything. She was twice as mean as we could ever be. And so we used to really have a lot of fun with her. We had this barn that had a loft in it, and we had this rope that hung from the very top. And we put a gunny sack filled with hay, that was our swing. So we'd go up the ladder, and someone would swing that swing up there, because it had a big hole right in the middle where they used to drive the big trucks in, to unload the hay and stuff in there. And so it was a big area with this, this rope hanging down. So we'd get up, way up on this high thing. It was at least as high as this ceiling, and we'd swing all the way across. God, what's happening? But that was a lot of fun. And I don't know, we just run around all over the place. We had horses, so we would ride way back, in the fields and everything, down the roads.
She'd come to visit and give
We
you
used
some
to.
culturing.
So I think we taught her all this stuff. And we used to go swimming in the rice field wells, just homey type things. When I was real little, I can remember coming to town, and there was an old barn-looking building that they used to show movies. They just set the projector down and had this big screen up. I remember that. It was just wooden benches across there, and they'd show all these Western movies, cowboy movies.
Do you remember any titles in particular?
No. I really don't. I don't know when they quit doing that because I was really quite small at that time. I remember watching them, but I couldn't even tell you who were in them at that time. But it was a big thing to go to a movie, back then.
What do you consider to be some of the most disappointing times in your childhood as opposed to the fun times?
Disappointing. I can't think of it. It was disappointing. I'm sure I had a lot of disappointments, but I can't.
What else did you do during summer vacations?
Well, we did a lot of work. we always had our work to do because it was just part. I mean, it was a family operation, and we all had certain jobs to do. We used to take care of the small cows, like after they took them away from the cows, then we'd have to raise them, and we had some cows that they used just as nursing cows. We'd have to, in mornings, like in school, we'd have to go out and,
Before school.
bring these cows in and feed the calves, and then we had bigger calves that you had to give grain to. We had those kind of chores to do before school and then after school.
How early did that mean getting up?
I guess it wasn't all that early, around 6:30 or 7, because school didn't start until 8:30.
Did you have any other kind of jobs in the summer? Did you work anywhere else?
No.
Let's see. Was school stressed equally for boys and girls at that time?
School? I would think so. We never worried about that type of thing at that time. There wasn't any discrimination between them.
I was just wondering if maybe the boys were pushed harder or the girls pushed harder. Like maybe thinking the boys should be working more on the farm or something.
No, no, I don't think. My memory was that a lot of them were going to go to college. By the time we graduated, so. I would say that probably there were more, in high school, there were probably more boys that took things like trig and calculus and those kind of subjects rather than girls, but other than that,
pretty equal.
Because there weren't so many jobs available for girls except like teachers or secretaries and that type of thing. We did have that. We didn't have so many doing these other things that they do today.
Would you consider Katy to be a pretty religious community at that time? I mean, was it real strictly religious or just different religions interwoven?
Well, it was predominantly Methodist and Baptist. There were a couple of smaller churches here, but those were predominantly, and I guess most everybody belonged to one or another. We were Catholic, and our church was in Brookshire, so that's where we used to go. A few families.
What were some of the main social activities when you were a teenager, like maybe a hangout or whatever?
What we did when we were teenagers? Well, at one time, seems like we used to go skating. I guess that's what they did. They opened the gym, the big old gym over there. They used to open that, and they had skating, roller skating in there. And we used to go there a lot. Otherwise, there was a show in Brookshire at that time. Or either we, I don't know, just go to people's houses and things like that.
Did the school sponsor a lot of dances? During football games or not?
Mm-mm. We did have our prom was in the gym.
Did y'all decorate for that?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what we're missing out on.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That's what I keep telling them, that it was an awful lot of fun doing. We set it up as a sort of a garden, and we had tables and chairs, and we had a lot of flowers. Everybody had flowers then, and went around to all the people's yards, and got flowers and bushes and stuff like that, and it was really pretty.
I really think that's what we're missing out on.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like one of the funnest things just to set it up. It makes it feel more like it's yours.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it was a lot of fun.
Was the rice farming industry very big when you were growing up? I heard it started.
Yes, it was pretty good. There were a few other there were some peanut farmers, and there was some cotton and some corn, but it kind of it started, I guess, earlier, but when I was little, before I was born, I guess, really, they had some rice farming around here, but cattle was a big thing too. And we had two brothers that lived behind us in an old farmhouse there, and they must have been in their 80s when I was little, but they used to come over and tell the most fantastic stories about this area. There was no fences and nothing like that when they moved here, and they were from up north too, and they used to herd the cattle from here to Kansas City on the cattle drives. And boy, it was just fantastic listening to him. But he would ride over to our house on a white horse. He had an old white horse, and just sit there and visit, and tell us kids all those stories. And it was just unbelievable. There weren't any trees or anything like that. Of course, he knew the few things that were here back in those days. I have some pictures and things like that some early history. I don't know what you've heard of Harry Wyman.
Yeah, I think I have.
He wrote a history. I have a copy of that. I think Miss Louise Sliff also wrote one of early Katy. That was way back, a couple generations before me. But, they talk about the Indians and all that being here along the Spy Island. There are a lot of people, that were here a lot longer before I was,
What would you consider the role of the woman to be when you were growing up? Was it
principally the homemaker? But they were beginning to do a lot of other things. Just like I said, my sister owned the newspaper, and she was kind of an outgoing person, and maybe before her time, really, she would have done quite well by now, I guess. But she had a milk route. She used to deliver some of the milk that we had, around to the houses here in Katy and stuff like that. So, I'm trying to think if I can think of any other women at that time who were doing things, other than I know we had a lady postmaster, and there were some ladies that had apparel stores. So I guess they were, they were beginning to be in business and so forth.
So you had like daily milk routes, or?
She did. Early in the morning, she would.
That's neat.
That was at the time when the plant was out here in the early 40s. She would bottle up the milk and deliver it to. That's where she really started, was delivering milk there to those, because there were a lot of houses close together, and that's how she got started in the newspaper business, because the war was going on then. Men in the service, and so she would visit with them, and find out where where their sons were and everything, or their husbands, whoever it was. And so she started writing a column then for the Berkshire paper.
What's your
to
sister's
keep up.
name?
Mary Ann Ernestus. She died in 1981.
A lot of initiative, it sounds like.
Yeah, she was a real worker. She could have really taught you at the early times. But she was 17 years older than I am. So.
Was she your oldest sister?
Yeah, she was the oldest.
Oldest sister. What are some of the changes that Katy has undergone that you don't really feel are for the better? If there are any.
Well, I guess you can't really knock progress, but it's a different type of living, like we were discussing earlier. You know, and I think that you can't keep that, I guess, you know, but it's a shame we can't incorporate it in with more people. It seems like the fewer people there are, the easier it is to have that community. But I think they're trying. People are trying more today to come back to that. I think they realize that they were missing something with just individual families, you know, living apart. I think that's probably the biggest thing. Of course, Katy has made such a change from the rural, you know, to urban,
All the suburbs, yeah. All these subdivisions.
People that who knew, you know, that like it was, hate to see it come, but like I say, you can't stop progress. And of course, it's helped a lot of people. A lot of the rice farmers and other farmers and what have you have sold their property at tremendous prices. And I think overall, more people probably have more money. Even though we complain about not having money, you have more things, a lot more, you know.
You seem more personal too.
Well, I mean, just the houses are nicer. All the things that people take for granted, I guess, you didn't have back then, but you were happy without them. You know, you didn't really like TV. A lot of people fuss about the people watching TV and everything because you did other things back then. But I think people probably spend their money on things. If we'd have had that much money, you know, we probably would have been into a lot more things back then. I mean, but we didn't miss not having. I don't know how to explain it, but I mean,
it does make sense.
You know, people talk about not having things or not having money and not having food, and yet they're living in these nice houses, and they've got clothes coming out of the walls, and they eat out all the time, you know, and go to the movies and have. Most of them have TVs and, you know, VCRs or what have you nowadays, but
I guess if you go,
we didn't have those things, but we had a lot of fun and enjoyment with each other, and I think sometimes that's more important.
Yeah, I think that's what we miss out on too. Because I can always remember complaining when I was little, Mom, I don't have anything to do. You know, that was like every word that came out of my mouth all the time. She said, well, you know, you got to make something to do. You got to make up games and stuff. Because, I mean, if there was anything on TV, I didn't know what to do with myself. Just going, I don't know.
Well, we had the advantage of being able to go outside, I guess you'd say. You know, where here, nowadays it's more or less, you've got a house next to you on each side. So you either go see those people or, you know, there's nothing that you can get into. I mean, we used to go out and pet the cows or ride horses, or you could always find something to do, you know.
With a lot of space, yeah.
We asked that question too, though. You know, it's a normal question for kids, I think. But we found things.
What sort of medical attention was available when you were a child?
We had a doctor and a druggist, you know, right in Katy, there where the Katy drug is. That's where the drugstore was. And,
do you remember the doctor's name?
The doctor's name was Dr. Motherall, and I think part of his family still lives here. There was one that was here, Dr. Cockrell or something like that. I don't know whether he was here before or after. But we had some experiences with them too. I know a stray dog came by when I must have been 5 I wasn't in school yet. No. And so he came on into town, and a lot of people petted him here, and found out that he had rabies.
Mm.
And so the whole town practically had to take all these shots, and I can remember him coming to the house, and we'd all try to hide,
Not the shots.
Anywhere to, because those were really painful at that time, these shots. But the sheriff that lived here, he lived in town too, he put him in a pen, and I remember him talking about how the dog chewed his way out, and they had to capture him. It was a big event,
Yeah.
Of course, they had to get everybody in town to get them that had seen him and petted him, and everything.
Were most of the ailments treated at home?
Most of what now?
The ailments, illnesses and stuff like that?
If you had any, the doctor came to your house most of the time, or by the time I was in school, we pretty well went to the doctor, up here.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was anything serious, we went to Houston. It wasn't that far away. So it's more or less like it is now, before the hospital came.
Mm-hmm. Most of the childbirths at home?
I think so. Until, I don't know what years, but when, like when I was born, I'm sure it must be.
Mm-hmm. What do you think has drawn people to Katy? Anything in particular? The cattle industries, the rice industries, or?
You're talking about businesses?
Mm-hmm. That made it pick up so much.
Well, it was strictly I think Houston is what brought
Stretching.
most everything to Katy, because it's the people. If you don't have a lot of people, then you don't have, like the businesses, like on Mason and Pride, they don't come until the people are there. And we didn't really have that many different types of businesses here, until that started developing. It was just what your town needed, and there was probably one of everything, and that was it. And didn't have an awful lot of competition.
Do you know where the Victorian Gallery is, that restaurant?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the house before it was a restaurant? Do you remember anything about it?
Ms. Alexander lived there. She used to rent out a room, I know, to young men, that were single and came here to work and things like that. She rented.
I heard that at one time that was like an operator. Do you know anything about that?
A what?
Like an operator telephone service?
I don't think.
I heard from someone in the nursing home, and she might have been talking about someplace else.
I don't think that was the building. I'm pretty sure that house was there all the time. Now, where the strip center is there on Main Street in Katy, where the drugstore is. Well, if you went to the end part of that, right next to that is vacant spot right now, where that little alley is, right on the end. Okay, that spot right next to there. There used to be a little green building there, and that was the telephone building, and it had the operator and the plug-in system is what they used. And it wasn't until probably 1950 that they changed from operator into a dial system here. I'm not sure on that date, but I think it would be somewhere in there. Where when you just dialed the operator, and told her what number you wanted or who you wanted. And she would call them, and she would tell you whether they went to town or they'd gone wherever, or if they didn't answer, or when they'd be back, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it was something, because I'm sure it must have been in the 50s, because I was working at the town's office at that time, I think, and I remember we hated it because, you know, it was so convenient to know where people were and how we could get a hold of them and everything.
Talk about a middleman.
You know, if you want to talk to someone that could probably tell you a lot about what went on, would be Elizabeth Clyde. I'm not sure whether she's retired or not. She worked for the telephone company. She may still
Is
be
she
in
married?
that office. No, she never married.
Client. Do you know the spelling?
Cliett. Yeah, I'm sure she has a phone number here. She is. I think she used to live in Katy Heights. I'm not sure if she still lives there.
Thanks a lot for letting me interview you.
You're quite welcome. It's kind of fun reminiscing.